call this meeting to order. This is the meeting of the Mendocino County Planning Commission, December 5th, 2024. Today's meeting is a hybrid meeting of the Planning Commission with participants both in person and digitally. The public may participate digitally in meetings by sending comments to pbscommissions@mendocinocounty.gov or orally via telecomment in lieu of personal attendance. All public comment will be made available to the commissioners, staff, and the general public after processing by staff, and can be viewed as attachments to this meeting agenda on the Planning Commission agenda page. May we have a roll call vote, please?
Commissioner Rabini?
Here.
Commissioner Jones?
Here.
Commissioner Wiedemann?
Here.
Chair Pollan?
Here.
And Commissioner Purnell is absent by prearrangement.
Thank you. Do we have determination of legal notice?
And all matters on the agenda have been properly noticed.
Thank you. Director's report. Do we have a report from our director?
Good morning, Julia Krog, Planning and Building Services Director. I have no director's report today, but I am happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Any questions for our director? Right?
I had one.
Oh, we do have one.
When do you think we'll get the feedback from the camping? You know, that you were going to get us, that what you heard us say.
Sure. So that item was postponed in getting direction from the board until into the new year when all 5 supervisorial districts are present to be able to weigh in on that. So we'll be getting feedback and I'll be able to share that then once that packet's ready and prepared. Mm-hmm.
Great. Thank you. All right, then, moving on to agenda item number 4, matters from the public expression. Members of the public are welcome to address the Planning Commission on items not listed on the agenda, but within the jurisdiction of the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission is prohibited by law from taking action on matters not on the agenda. Individuals wishing to address the Planning Commission under matters from the public may do so in person, via email, or Zoom. If any members of the public logged into the Zoom meeting wish to speak under public expression, please use the raise hand feature to allow staff to add you to the meeting. Do we have any requests under telecomment for public expression?
I do not have any.
All right. Do we have anyone in the room who wishes to speak under public expression? All right. And is there anyone on Zoom with their hand raised?
There are no hands raised on Zoom.
All right. Thank you very much. All right. I'll close public expression then. Moving on. Item number 5. This is the consent calendar. We have the approval of the Planning Commission minutes from November 7th, 2024. Do we have any public comment on the consent calendar? All right. Any additions or revisions to those minutes? Then I will entertain a motion.
I move that we approve the consent calendar.
Okay.
I second.
Thank you. All in favor? Or wait, roll call.
Commissioner Wiedemann?
Yes.
Commissioner Jones?
Yes.
Commissioner Babini?
Yes.
Chair Pollan?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
You put my check down before I even said yes there, Jim. Jumping the gun. All right. We'll move on now to item number 6A. This is case number UM_2024-005, Point Arena Lighthouse Keepers Incorporated. This is a modification of a coastal development use permit, CDU 5-2002, which would involve remodeling an existing innkeeper's house into 3 separate rental units. This would increase the total number of rental units from 7 to 9. The remodel would expand the footprint of the innkeeper's house and add a new walkway, patio, parking pads, septic transmission lines, windows, lighting, and doors. I'll open the public hearing now. Has there been any correspondence or telephone calls received?
All correspondence have been posted to the public website.
Thank you very much. All right. May we have a presentation from staff, please?
Yes, good morning, everyone. This is Liam Crowley, Planning and Building staff. So as was mentioned, this is a use permit modification. The owner is the Point Arena Lighthouse Keepers Incorporated, and the applicant/agent is Mark Hancock, the executive director, and I do believe we have Mr. Hancock on Zoom if there are any questions. So these are just some maps of the general area of the project site. So this is the Point Arena Lighthouse, which is at the very tip of the peninsula here. And the building in question, if you can see my mouse, is this easternmost structure here. This property is in the open space general plan classification, and so a little bit of background. The use of these structures as rental units was officially recognized as a legal non-conforming use under the use permit that's being modified today, the CDU 5-2002, and they were originally built and established in the 1960s. There's been a couple of a Veterans Memorial. So the Lighthouse itself, the fog signal building, which is this building here at the very western end of the site, and two accessory structures, these two right here, you can see my mouse, and the general parking area near the fog signal building and the lighthouse itself were listed in the National Register of Historic Places in 1991. However, the rental buildings themselves on the eastern portion of the site are not part of that historic site. So the standard of review for this use permit modification are any of the applicable coastal element policies and coastal zone regulations. And there are 4 specific findings that must be made to authorize the expansion of a non-conforming use. I won't read all of those out, but those are included and discussed in the staff report. And this is just an image from that National Register documentation. Lighthouse and the fog signal building. So the first kind of major area to discuss are environmentally sensitive habitat areas. There was a biological survey that was submitted for this project, and surveys were conducted in March, April, and May of 2024. It was found that the entirety of the project area was within a common velvet grass / sweet vernal grass meadow, which is not considered a sensitive natural community and therefore is not considered an ESHA. And no other special status plant or wildlife species were identified within the survey, including the federally listed Point Arena mountain beaver. CDFW did provide, the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, that is, did provide a couple recommendations on the project, including reseeding any disturbed areas with locally native bluff grass or herbaceous species. That future landscaping, although landscaping, I should note that landscaping isn't proposed as part of this project, but that future landscaping be comprised of locally native tree and shrub species, and that the applicant should target the removal of any non-native species that are on the site. And those recommendations have been included as conditions of approval in the resolution. So the next topic are bluff hazards. So if you'll see on the site plan here, it's a little bit smaller, but the portion of development that's closest to the bluff is this extra parking pad here to the south, I guess that is. And there was a engineering geologic reconnaissance done in 2023 that estimated that the total bluff retreat in that area from 2023 to 2098 is expected to be approximately 20 feet. And the proposed parking pad is located approximately 80 feet from the bluff edge. So staff doesn't see any issues as far as bluff hazards go with the proposed development. Next is visual resources. So this property is within the highly scenic area designated in the LCP. And these are just some images from Google Street View showing a couple different angles of the site. So the proposed addition to the eastern structure would kind of extend the footprint of the structure right where my cursor is circling right around here. And the addition would be sort of shielded a bit by this existing shed up here when you're looking from this view to the, I guess that would be the northwest. And the proposed addition would match the height of the existing building and the materials and colors as well. And there would be some additional external lighting that would be installed, and that would be shielded and downcast in accordance with the county code. So again, staff feels that this is consistent with the visual resource policies and that it'll have really a minimal impact on views of the ocean. So just some other considerations. The existing septic system has a capacity of 3,900 gallons per day, and the new development would result in a total wastewater flow of approximately 2,948 gallons per day. And the existing water infrastructure, the wells and water storage capacity is considered sufficient for the additional units. The Mendocino County Archaeological Commission determined that any additional archaeological surveying was not required for this project at their meeting. And staff feels that there's sufficient public access available to the shoreline in this area that doesn't warrant the provision of any additional access. So you can see this property is actually adjacent to the California Coastal National Monument, which has a couple public trails to the bluff immediately to the, I guess that would be the east of this property. These maroon colored lines on the map here. And then lastly, the staff determined that the project is categorically exempt from CEQA for the existing facilities and construction and conversion of small structures exemption. So I think that's all I have, and with that, staff is just recommending approval of the project in accordance with the resolution that's been attached to the packet. So with that, I'm available for any questions.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions from commissioners for staff? All right.
Yes, thank you. On the site plan showing the additions, I think that is, it's A1 on it's not, it's the floor plan. And I'm just a little confused on that floor plan. So will you circle the new and where the existing is, or do you have a site plan to show all of that?
I do. One moment, I'll have to stop sharing and reshare. With
Okay, that would be great.
Was that what you're referring to?
Yes, and so yes, and the existing unit in relationship to the new is where?
So essentially, so I guess this sort of square in the corner over here would be the new addition.
Okay.
The rest is existing as
Yeah.
part of this structure, and so they would basically reconfigure,
Remodel.
yeah, some of the existing structure to add these two units. So, so this sort of area right here would be a one-bedroom unit. This area here would be a studio unit, and then this remaining kind of eastern half of the structure would be a two-bedroom unit.
Okay, thank
So,
you. That just clarifies a little bit for me. Thank you.
Commissioner Babini, do you have any questions for staff? Okay, thank you very.
I have one question.
Okay, great.
I'm assuming this is, when you say rental, you actually meant like vacation rental?
Yes, that's correct.
Because that's not the way it's described in the request, so maybe you want to clarify that. It just says rental. I don't know if it's clear in the resolution.
Or is it worker, or is
No,
it for
it's-
one of the, it's
it's
not for the
vacation
workers, it's
No,
just really rentals?
yeah,
Okay.
essentially.
Yeah, I think-
Guests or vacation.
And looking at Exhibit A under conditions of approval, you might want to make that clarification, because it just says 3 separate rental units instead of vacation rental. It's a
Certainly,
small
yeah.
thing, but you never know. Might come
Yeah,
up.
we could certainly add that as a small edit to the resolution if desired.
All right. Thank you very much. I don't have any questions either at this time. Then, do we have the applicant present on Zoom?
Yes, this is Mark Hancock. I'm the president and executive director of Point Arena Lighthouse Keepers Incorporated.
All right. Did you have anything you wanted to add, Mr. Hancock, to the presentation that you'd heard so far?
Just that it's been an absolute pleasure working with Liam. He has been professional and thorough and communicative and extremely helpful whenever I've had questions, and I really appreciate his support.
Thank you very much for that. Any questions for the applicant from commissioners? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Hancock. All right, we'll now invite public comment. Is there anyone in the room who wishes to comment on this item? All right, seeing no one. And is there anyone with a hand raised on Zoom who would like to comment on this item?
There are no hands raised on Zoom.
Okay, thank you. All right then, do we have any final remarks from staff?
This is Liam. I think we're just taking a few moments here to add some edits to the resolution just to reflect Commissioner Jones' comments. But other than that, nothing. Thanks.
Can I make one other comment? I'm just keyed into the whole findings thing about the non-conforming use in open space, and I don't see those findings made in the staff report or the resolution. So maybe I missed them. It's quite possible. But if you could just confirm that they're in there, that would make me feel a little more confident because, I don't know, like in Fort Bragg, we don't let people do this. So I'm like curious how you can expand a non-conforming use. That's not saying that's bad. I'm just saying that it's interesting, and just want to make sure those findings are in there.
Certainly, yeah, this is Liam again. So within the resolution, this is in the findings, it should be, I think it was numbered a little
Finding 3.
awkwardly, but yes.
Finding 3. Okay.
Finding
Finding
3.
3.
Page 2 of the findings.
Yeah, where it starts with per MCC section 20.480.025, where it's referencing the expansion of forming.
And all 4 of those findings are included underneath that same finding number 3.
Does that address your concerns, Commissioner Jones?
I'm not seeing it, but
I
I'm in
think
wrong place.
the spacing might have, there was an error, because in the middle of the first paragraph on finding number 3, the sentence starts with per MCC section 20.480.025A1, and that's the first finding for, yeah, that's highlighted on the screen there, for
Yes.
the first finding for the non-conforming uses, and then it goes on. That's the other 4. So I think the numbering was just incorrect there. Yeah, the formatting. Apologies about that.
It's all right. I don't want to whip a horse or whatever, but usually when I make findings, I make a reasonable argument as to why that finding can be made. And you're just repeating the finding, which is okay. In this case, I think there is a reasonable argument. So I'll just shut up and sit down. Although I am already. I'll just shut up.
And you're not shutting up, yeah. All right.
No, I am.
All right.
I think I'll just clarify, staff did add some additional supporting statements below each one of those findings, so I do think that we have that evidence in the record to support how those findings are satisfied as part of the resolution. And then I'll just look to Senior Planner Russ Ford to show the minor additions that we are recommending be made to identify these as vacation rental units in the resolution.
Good morning, Russ Ford, Senior Planner. Just on the screen, you'll see a couple of red line changes to add the word vacation in front of rental units in 3 different places.
Thank you, Russ. All right. Any other comments from the commission? All right. I'll close the public hearing at this point then. The matter is now before the commission. I would invite a motion.
I make a motion to approve UM 2024-0005, Point Arena Lighthouse Keepers Incorporated, with the changes of adding the vacation, describing the rental units. Let's see, let me finish reading this. Granting an amendment of use permit CDU 5-2002 to remodel an existing innkeeper's house into 3 separate rental units. This would increase the total number of rental units from 7 to 9. The remodel would expand the footprint of the innkeeper's house and add a new walkway, patio, parking pad, septic transmission lines, window, lighting, and doors.
Yep. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All right. We have a roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Jones,
Yes.
Commissioner Wiedemann,
Yes.
Commissioner Babini,
Yes.
Chair Pollen.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
All right. Thank you very much. All right. Next item is item 6B. This is case number UM_2024-0008, Mendocino Unified School District. This is a coastal development use permit modification for the demolition and replacement of 2 existing water tanks, chlorination and control building, and related infrastructure, installation of a driveway off Little Lake Road, improvement of 2 existing wells, conversion of an existing test well into a supply well, installation of up to 6 new test wells, and demolition of 2 sheds. I'll now open the public hearing. Has there been any correspondence and/or telephone calls received?
All correspondence have been posted to the public website.
Thank you very much. Staff presentation, please.
For that project introduction. This is a requested modification of Coastal Development Use Permit U 2023-0004, which was only just approved by this body on April 4th of this year. So I'll start with a quick review of what was approved then before going into the proposed changes. For the sake of clarity, I will be referring to U 2023-0004 as the April permit going forward. Next slide, please.
Stand by just one sec. I
Sure.
need to get the slides loaded. Thank you.
I didn't catch the name of that speaker.
This is Rob Fitzsimmons.
Yes. He's the project planner for the project, Rob Fitzsimmons.
Sorry.
Just wanted that on record.
He's a disembodied voice somewhere in the ether. All right, Mr. Fitzsimmons, I think we have the slides up now.
So the site is located in the coastal zone, about 1 mile east-southeast of Mendocino Town Center on the north side of Little Lake Road, east of the intersection with Gurley Lane and located at 44-100 Little Lake Road. The parcel is zoned for public facilities and has significant forest vegetation and was already developed with water tanks, wells, and other water infrastructure connecting to other MUSD-owned parcels, including the nearby Mendocino Elementary, visible in the image on the right. The April permit authorized minor impact utilities on site, including the demolition and replacement of 2 existing water tanks, chlorination and control building, and related infrastructure, along with the improvement of 3 existing wells and the installation of up to 10 new wells. With the April permit, the Planning Commission authorized 48-foot tall water tanks higher than the standard 35-foot limit for the Public Facilities Zoning District. MUSD adopted a mitigated negative declaration for the project pursuant to CEQA, identifying a number of potential impacts on the environment, but finding none would be significant after incorporating mitigations. The Mendocino County Planning Commission concurred with this determination as a responsible agency, incorporating said mitigations into the conditions of the April permit. Next slide, please. The Planning Commission's approval of the April permit was appealed to the California Coastal Commission, which led to an interdepartmental site visit in August. During the
He
site
needs to
visit,
slow down.
Hey,
Hey,
Rob.
do slow down, because we can't, see you, so we're having a hard
Yeah,
time
we're not-
processing.
Right.
Yes, slow down a little bit in the presentation. Thank you.
okay.
All right, go ahead at a nice
Sure.
Relax pace.
The Planning Commission's approval of the April permit was appealed to the Coastal Commission, which led to an interdepartmental site visit in August. During this visit, it was determined that some of the development proposed in the April permit may have been located in an ESHA buffer, an environmentally sensitive habitat area buffer, and should be adjusted. The applicant subsequently had a revised wetland delineation and reduced buffer analysis prepared, confirming this. Given this new analysis, the applicant, in consultation with the Coastal Commission, elected to apply for a modification to the April permit through the county, resulting in this application. The project is grant funded and there are deadlines in place to secure all permits and complete the work, or the grant monies will be forfeited. The applicant's representative can speak to this further. From the county's perspective, the April permit remains approved but stayed, pending resolution of the appeal to the Coastal Commission. Should the modification be approved, it will replace the April permit. Should the modification be denied, the earlier permit's approval will stand and the appeal to the Coastal Commission will move forward. Though my understanding is it is highly unlikely a resolution will occur quickly enough for the grant deadlines to be met. But that said, it should be noted that the Planning Commission's, should the Planning Commission decide to approve this modification, that decision can still also be reconsidered by the Coastal Commission. Approving the modification doesn't supersede the Coastal Commission's appeal authority. Next slide, please. The proposed modification would relocate the not yet built water tanks, treatment building, and new wells to avoid ESHA buffer encroachment. The previously approved 10 new wells have been reduced to 6 and are now only proposed as test wells. If demonstrated to be viable, MUSD plans to convert them to production wells with a follow-up permit modification, but that's not covered by this modification. Additionally, only 2 of the existing production wells are still proposed for redevelopment. Finally, it was determined that the existing access road may be encroaching on an ESHA, so instead of widening it, the modified permit would authorize a separate new driveway and the addition of a symbolic wooden fence along the existing road. Conditions 1 through 9 in the proposed resolution remained unchanged from those applied to the April permit. Conditions relating to the formerly proposed road expansion and water production have been removed, though the Planning Commission may wish to reintroduce language from the latter in regards to the well testing if desired. And we can go into that further in a moment. After attending the August site visit and reviewing the updated materials provided to the applicant, CDFW, the Department of Fish and Wildlife, raised some concerns about the nearby ESHA, all of which are addressed in the newly proposed conditions 10 through 12. It is CDFW's understanding that further on-site restoration work unrelated to the proposed development will be pursued under a subsequent permit or modification. Staff would also like to mention environmental health's comments on this project as it arrived too late to be incorporated into the staff report. Quote, water well applications must be submitted to EH. No water well applications have been submitted to EH since 1977. End quote. Staff feel the concern is covered under the proposed condition 4. Condition 14 has also been added at the request of the Coastal Commission per their November 26 comments, emphasizing that the limits set by the site plan with regard to ESHA buffers are binding on the vegetation removal for fire fuel reduction during construction. Next slide, please. As a public agency, the Mendocino Unified School District was required to consider the environmental impacts of the project before moving forward with it, making them the lead agency under CEQA. As previously mentioned, they found all potential impacts could be adequately mitigated and so adopted an MND, a mitigated negative declaration. In approving the April permit, the Planning Commission also adopted the MND as a responsible agency. MUSD has prepared an addendum to the adopted MND, articulating how the changes proposed with this modification do not necessitate a subsequent MND or initial study. With this item, the Planning Commission is again acting as a responsible agency and will decide whether or not to adopt this addendum, the MND with this addendum. As the project modification's reduction in scope would not result in significant environmental effects or a substantial increase in the severity of previously identified effects, staff agree with this analysis and recommend adopting the previous MND with the new addendum. Staff do wish to note that a revised version of the addendum was recently submitted by the applicant, providing additional clarifying information. Although the overall determination has not changed, staff recommend adopting the addendum dated November 22nd, 2024. Next slide.
Can I ask you again just to slow down and try and speak a little clearer? We're having a little bit of a hard time following you. Sorry about that.
Sure, my apologies. The Coastal Zone Code establishes findings that must be made in order to approve the project. The findings included in the draft resolution, the findings are included in the draft resolution before you. Staff feel that the information presented in the staff report and this presentation, and with the recommended conditions, all applicable findings can be made. Staff recommends the action on screen, conditionally approving the project. That concludes staff's presentation, and I remain available for questions.
All right, thank you very much. Questions from the commission? Commissioner Jones.
Sure, I have a couple of questions. Throughout the application, your analysis kind of rests on two key features. One is that the water from this project would not be used to support additional development within the Mendocino town area. So that's one of the key features that's mentioned throughout the project. And another was that the water would only be used during drought situations. And I don't find either of those key features included in the permit or the special conditions. And it seems like key missing information is missing. And so I'd like you to think about how to address that, either in the project description or that's in the resolution or in the special conditions themselves. And I would actually recommend that the special conditions to address that get included. I guess that's sort of a question and sort of a statement asking for clarification. And likewise, I would also just follow up that the MOU seems to be referenced a lot in the staff report, and the MOU isn't part of the packet, so I have no idea what all is in the MOU, but I'm wondering if we wanted to include that as well, just for clarity. And then the last kind of question comment is this permit seems to rely a little bit on a subsequent CDP being approved for extraction wells if the water tests determine that that's appropriate. And it seems like that CDP should come to the Planning Commission rather than to the CDP administrator, because it's really kind of part of this project. Those are my 4 substantial comments.
Thank you. Did you want to have other commissioners ask questions, or would you like to try to get some answers on those?
However flows.
Let's get some responses to those before
Whatever.
we move on, if we could. Director Krog or Planner Fitzsimmons, would you like to respond to any of that?
If I may, through the chair, Russ Ford, Senior
Russ
Planner, excuse me, we're happy to take some direction for some additional conditions. If the commission supports that, we can redline the reso as necessary.
I guess, so Commissioner Jones, would you like to make some specific recommendations to?
I don't
new
think it's
conditions?
right for me to do that yet. I think we should
Okay.
have the public hearing first.
Perfect.
I just want to like put it in everybody's mind.
All right.
Because I imagine that a lot of the people in the public are concerned about some of those
Yep.
issues.
Agreed. Thank you. Commissioner Wiedemann, do you have questions or comments?
I had a few, and I'll have more later after I hear from everybody. But what's of interest to me is we approved the 2023-0004, and yet we approved and we didn't have any information regarding it's full of Bishop Pine and the site. So I wonder that after their site visit, why we didn't have that analysis before when we approved the 0004 application. That's a question. I don't need the answer yet, but I'm concerned about that. And then what I would like to see is on the map, the site plan. So the existing site plan that was approved, an overlay of where the original wells were, which I see here on what's in my copy, which sheet C101, and then where today's application in other words, I don't have an overlay of what was approved in 004 and what's happening today. I have different maps for each of those, but it would be helpful for me to see the actual overlay because it would give me a little bit more understanding of the impacts, even with the 50-foot ESHA setback, and that's all, you know. So that's just a few to start, and I'll pass with that.
Would you like responses to those questions before we move on to another commissioner?
I would like the planner to go over the site plans of the 004 and the proposed today. And at some point on that is, it keeps referring to, well, if 008 doesn't get passed, 0004 is still alive, and they may resort to that.
So to clarify, the original use permit is on appeal to the California Coastal Commission. So at this time, that no final action has been taken on that permit by the Coastal Commission. This modified project is intended to supersede that prior authorization.
Right. And if this doesn't, if let's just assume if this doesn't get passed, it's kind of, you know, the 0004 then is still alive.
And it would continue through the appeal process with the California Coastal Commission.
Right, okay. And would the applicant have time to pull that?
To withdraw that
Yes.
application? I think generally that would be a question to ask the Coastal Commission, but I believe generally you can withdraw an application entirely. But that would be something that they'd have to work on with the Coastal Commission.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Babini?
Oh, and it does look like Rob has his hand raised.
Oh, Mr. Fitzsimmons? Rob, go ahead.
Rob, if you're speaking, we're not able to hear you.
He was
Oh,
having some
technologies.
technical issues earlier.
We love technology. All right, well, Mr. Fitzsimmons, if you fix your end, give us a wave or something, we'll come back to you, because I think there are some questions for you that the commission would like answered. Are you all right if I move on to Commissioner Babini while we?
Yes.
Okay, great, thanks. Perfect.
Apparently we, on Zoom, they're able to hear Rob. We're just not able to hear him in chambers. And to confirm.
I'm looking to our technical wizards in the back
In
of
the back.
room.
He was just going to say that the agent's applicant has a presentation going into the plan modifications in more detail, so some of that may answer Commissioner Wiedemann's questions.
Okay, all right, well, maybe we'll keep going then. Great. Commissioner Babini?
I'll hold mine as well until
Okay.
after the applicant.
Okay, thanks. I'm just going to put a couple of mine out there, and maybe they'll be answered. But there were a few items noted in some of the public comment that caught my attention. One was about the proposed amount of water to be removed from the wells. I think it was estimated at 24.5 acre-feet per year was a figure that was quoted. And I didn't see that. I saw that in some public comment, but I didn't see that in the staff report or any of the materials provided by the county or the applicant. So I'd be curious to understand where that number comes from. And there was also reference to an ongoing groundwater sustainability study that's underway out on the coast, and I'm curious how this interfaces with that. I think, again, there is considerable concern amongst neighbors around the impact of this project on adjacent wells, and I'd like to understand in more clarity how we're conditioning this project to mitigate or eliminate those impacts. But maybe the applicant's presentation will address some of that, and if not, we'll dig into it further. All right. Do we have the applicant on We have the applicant in the room. All right. Wow. Humans love it. All right. Come on up and please introduce yourself for the record.
Good morning, commissioners. My name is Matt Kennedy. I am the applicant's agent and the project manager for the project. The applicant, Mr. Jason Morris, superintendent of Mendocino Unified School District, is here as well. And okay, great. And the slides are up on the screen. So without any further ado, I'll begin and just start by thanking you for giving us the opportunity to present the project with you here today. This is a really important project for the school district, and I'll go into some detail about the reasons why it is, but also for the village. And then at the end of the presentation, in, I think, alignment with the staff recommendations, I'll be asking you to take some actions today. Next slide. So this is just an overview of the presentation. There's quite a number of slides, so I'm going to try to keep moving through it. But if you do have a question as I'm proceeding, please stop me, and I'm happy to speak to that. So I'll give an overview. I'll talk about the existing water system. I'll talk about the funding that the school district has received, what the recommended project was coming out of that, the funding that the community services district received in partnership with the school district to contribute to the project, the appeal and the modified project, and then a summary, some clarifications that will hopefully address some of the questions that have been presented and the recommendations. Next slide. So the following slides here provide an overview of some of the key regulatory and compliance issues that the project will address and the community benefits. Next slide. So the project has its infancy on August 23rd, 2016. So it's been near 8 years. And this was when Mendocino Unified School District received a letter from the State Water Board Division of Drinking Water. The letter outlined a number of deficiencies with their water system and recommended that the school district pursue grant funding to identify and address any other issues that are found, and to develop short-term and long-term needs, and to incorporate those needs into a water system master plan. They also want the school district to take steps to keep the system in compliance with state and federal Safe Drinking Water Act requirements. And some of those items that were identified in the letter are summarized on the slide. Inadequate source production, so a lack of well capacity to meet the maximum day demands, a lack of monitoring and alarm systems for their water system, a need for cross-connection control, a water system master plan, and they recommended the school district apply for grant funding to try to make these improvements. Slide, please. So in general, some of the other deficiencies that were found included dilapidated water treatment building, which is in poor condition and in need of replacement, a lack of site access for emergency fire protection, a need to replace the 2 existing tanks, which are at the end of their service life and do not meet seismic requirements, and then inadequate fire water storage. There's a lack of adequate water storage in accordance with NFPA and California Fire Code for fire protection of the school-owned facilities. And through the many years of effort working on this project, many other issues were identified. Next slide, please. In 2020-2021, California experienced its worst drought on record, and many wells in Mendocino went dry, and many people and businesses needed to purchase hauled water from outside the village. MCCSD, the Mendocino City Community Services District, pursued and obtained some funding from the state and developed an emergency water supply to develop an emergency water supply that could be used by the village.
There's an earthquake detected now, but apparently we're okay. We didn't feel it. Oh, did you? Oh, yeah, maybe do we need to go outside? The screen is shaking.
Oh, I feel it.
Oh, now it's moving. Geotechnical realities. Should we maybe go outside?
Yeah.
Pause, we'll reconvene in 5 minutes if the building's still standing.
It was a very,
No, it's still going.
very
All right, are we connected online back there? Okay. All right, well, let's get this done before the building falls down around us. All right, go ahead. Thank you.
When California experienced its worst drought on record, many wells in Mendocino went dry. Many people and businesses needed to purchase hauled water from outside the village. MCCSD, the Mendocino City Community Services District, pursued and obtained funding from the state to develop an emergency water supply that could be used by the village during periods of drought when water was not available from other municipal water agencies in the area, like the city of Fort Bragg. The combination of these two needs, the school district's needs to improve its water system and the community's need for water during these severe droughts, set up a tremendous opportunity that has been seized upon by MUSD and MCCSD to partner and combine their grant funding to address the deficiencies in Mendocino Unified's water system that I summarized on the previous slide, while simultaneously providing an emergency supply of potable water for those in the village that need it and can be used during periods of drought, declared drought emergency when water is not available. Together, MUSD and MCCSD have secured $11.9 million in state grant funding to put towards this project that'll provide water security to MUSD and the village of Mendocino for generations to come. And it's opportunities like these that really come along only once every generation or two. And the map that's on the screen shows the wells that went dry during the 2020-2021 drought. Those are the magenta or the pink little marks, and in each one of those is kind of a block area. So there were maybe 3 or 4 or 1 well that went dry in each of those areas. And then the yellow were the ones that went dry during the previous drought, which I think was 2015 timeframe. During the last drought, there was over 500,000 gallons of water that was hauled to Mendocino from Fort Bragg and also from Ukiah to fill tanks. Okay, I'll continue.
Think about those people. Scary.
All right, you can continue. Thank you.
Thank you. Also, in 2021, Fort Bragg stopped selling water to those along the coast with dry wells due to the lack of their water supply. And it was really a godsend. The state provided $2 million to the county for drought relief to help cover some of the cost of the water hauling. Next slide. So this project will provide these following benefits that are listed on the screen. They'll bring Mendocino Unified's public water system into compliance with state and federal requirements associated with the Safe Drinking Water Act. They'll address deficiencies identified by the Division of Drinking Water in their August 2016 inspection letter. They'll bring Mendocino Unified's into compliance with state fire water storage requirements for their facilities. The project will provide additional fire water storage for the village of Mendocino that can be used by first responders during fire emergencies. And it'll provide a source of emergency potable water to those in need whose wells go dry during periods of declared drought emergency when water is not available from other water suppliers in the area, as occurred in the last drought. And consistent with the Urban Multi-Benefit Drought Relief Grant funding that Mendocino City CSD received, priority for that water is for the village of Mendocino. Next slide. So the next series of slides presents an overview of Mendocino Unified's existing water system and the populations and the facilities that it serves. Next slide. So the existing system was built sometime in the 1970s. We don't have dates of when the exact construction occurred, but there are 2 existing wells on the site that supply water, well number 1 and number 2. There are 2 water storage tanks, one 50,000 gallon redwood tank and a 65,000 gallon bolted steel tank. There's about 8,500 feet of distribution pipeline, 8 to 12 inches, 9 water services, and 15 fire hydrants. And these are the only fire hydrants that provide fire protection water for the village of Mendocino. There's also water treatment that occurs, some pH adjustment to the water, and chlorination to disinfect the water. And then there is some monitoring of pumping rates, water usage, tank levels, and water quality. There's also some decommissioned facilities on the school district sites that includes 2 old caisson wells that are near the water course and an old abandoned water storage tank at the high school. Next slide. The existing system serves the population of the school, which is at present about 430 students and 100 staff. It also serves the community center of Mendocino, which on a typical day accommodates about 75 students, 20 adults, and 8 staff. Periodically, the water has been used for irrigation of play fields at the high school, at the K-8 school, and at Friendship Park, but there are some other wells and sources that are used for irrigation purposes. Mendocino Unified has taken active steps to reduce the volume of potable water that's used for irrigation since the 2015 drought, and has worked very closely with Mendocino City CSD to seek funding for a separate recycle water system project to increase the use of recycled water for irrigation and cease the use of the limited groundwater for that purpose. Next slide. This slide shows some of the historical water usage. So the dates are between 2009 and 2020. And I'm sorry, I don't have more recent data, but I think the trends are pretty clear. You can see that there's generally from month to month, the school district uses between 100 and 200,000 gallons per month to meet their potable water needs. And that works out to about 5,000 gallons per day, sometimes more, sometimes less, or about 6 gallons per person per day. The average demand varies between about 4,200 gallons per day and 6,700 gallons per day. And I'll note too that everything that has been done to date, to develop this project has been done using data, engineering, following, requirements, and really using data to make data-driven decisions and informed decisions in that regard. I'll point out too on the chart, you can see that there's some spikes that come up, and those are indicated during like the summer months. So those were periods that were earlier on in the early teens when MUSD was irrigating more of the play fields during the summertime to keep them green. But you can see that dropped off in later years. Next slide. This is an overview of the school district's water system. So looking on the right-hand side of the figure, which is to the east, is the tank site where the tanks and wells are located and the school's maintenance building. There's the Mendocino's K through 8 campus. Further down, the next red blob next to State Route 1 is Friendship Park and the community center, and then you have Mendocino High School. And so there's a number of good-sized water mains that provide good fire flow and good service into the village, and as I noted previously, 15 fire hydrants. Next slide. This is the tank site. So this is the project site in question here. And this just shows the layout of the existing facility. So there's a couple of abandoned wells. These are old caisson wells that were probably built a long time ago, maybe in the 40s or 50s, that were decommissioned. There's the 65,000 gallon steel tank, the redwood tank, the water treatment building, the 2 wells, well number 1 and number 2, and then the test well number 6, which was constructed about 3 years ago. And then you can also see some of the water mains that are present. And then just for context, Little Lake Road is at the bottom of the exhibit. Okay, next slide. So in the next series of slides, they summarize the work that Mendocino Unified has completed to obtain funding from the State Water Resources Control Board, Division of Financial Assistance, and the development of a plan to improve their water system. Next slide. So in August 2016 is when the Division of Drinking Water issued their inspection letter, and immediately following that, in September, Mendocino Unified issued a competitive request for proposals for water system engineering services. GHD, the company I work for, proposed on that contract and was selected by MUSD, and a professional services contract was executed on January 17, 2017. Our first task under the contract was to develop and submit an application for a planning grant through the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund. The application was prepared over the following couple of months and submitted to the State Division of Financial Assistance on March 16th, 2017. A little over a year later, so this takes some time, in May 2018, MUSD was notified by DFA that their application was successful, and as a severely disadvantaged agency MUSD was eligible for and received the maximum planning grant funding amount of $500,000. And that was to develop a master plan and to develop a design for improvements to their system. Next slide, please. So from May 2018 to January 2020, we worked on developing the 20-year water system master plan. And that master plan included an evaluation of the planning area, an analysis of historic water usage, so some of that you saw on the slide previously, an assessment of their existing water facilities, a cross-connection control survey, so this looks at potential points of contamination into the drinking water system, a hydraulic analysis of their system, development of alternatives and an analysis of alternatives to fix the water system, a development of a recommended project, a review of environmental considerations, a planning level cost estimate to implement the project, and then a plan to implement the project. And after the, let's see, yeah, I think that's it. So next slide, please. So a number of deficiencies were identified, many of which I summarized before, but we did confirm through well pump testing that there is a lack of adequate source capacity to meet their maximum day demands. Their 2 existing wells are capable of producing about 12 gallons per minute, and they need just about 18 gallons a minute to meet their maximum day demand. And the Division of Drinking Water requires that the supply capacity be capable of meeting the maximum day demand. The system lacks chlorine residual analyzers and alarm systems to meet federal and state drinking water requirements, pH analyzers for the same purpose. The water treatment building is very old and dilapidated and in poor condition and needs complete replacement. And there's a lack of adequate site access for fire protection. And this is in accordance with, again, California Fire Code as enforced in this case by the Division of the State Architect. Next slide, please. A number of other deficiencies were found, including the condition of their 2 existing water tanks, which are at the end of their useful service life, and also do not meet seismic requirements. They are not anchored on their foundations as required by the building code. And there's a lack of adequate fire storage to meet NFPA and fire code fire protection requirements for all of the school's facilities. And I think it's important to note that none of MUSD's facilities have fire sprinkler systems. And so a more detailed analysis of the fire water storage required to meet the California Fire Code found that 630,000 gallons of fire water storage was needed to meet those fire code requirements. And this volume is based on the largest and oldest building owned by MUSD, which is at the high school. Next slide. So this next series of slides summarizes the recommended project. The Drinking Water State Revolving Funding is only able to be used to replace water storage in kind. So even though, sorry, next slide. Even though a significant greater volume of water is needed to meet those requirements, it's not possible within the constraints of the funding source that MUSD was able to tap into. And they would have had to self-fund the difference to provide the larger tanks, which amounts to about almost $2 million, a large sum that this district doesn't have. But the recommended project includes these elements: to redevelop well 1 and rehabilitate well 2, and then to construct a new well, which is well number 6, and a test well was constructed, so we're looking at converting that test well to production well. Properly abandoning the old shallow caisson wells that were highlighted on the previous slide that are near the water course. They were previously decommissioned to protect, and that's to protect the water quality of the stream and the aquifer. To replace the 2 existing tanks with new bolted steel tanks, and to increase the total volume of water storage to no more than 630,000 gallons to meet the fire protection requirements. The next slide, please. The project also recommends a means of ensuring adequate chlorine residual in the treated water entering into the distribution system. which is not being monitored right now. They're monitoring residual going into the tank, but not what's leaving the tank and entering the system. Replacing the existing treatment building with a new CMU or concrete masonry unit building with a metal roof for fire resiliency. New chlorine and pH analyzers and alarm systems to meet Drinking Water Act requirements. Next slide. Improving first responder and fire department access to the tank and well site. Converting, so abandoning one of the shallow caisson wells and then converting one of the other wells into a monitoring well so we can monitor groundwater levels near the water course on their site. Installing a staff gauge on the water course. These are the kind of some of the headwaters to Slaughterhouse Creek. So monitoring the water levels in the creek over the long term. And I'll note that a stream gauge has been installed on the stream and it's been read for over a year now, or nearly a year, excuse me. And then confirming the source capacity after completing the new well and the redevelopment of the two existing wells to make sure that we're able to meet the school's water demands. And then lastly, the state wanted to see improved security of their water system by installing some fencing and gates around it. It's currently kind of open, anybody can go wandering there. Next slide, please. So following all that work, in May 2019, the State Water Resources Control Board Division of Drinking Water concurred with the project and the recommendations and approved the master plan document. The proposed project addresses all the deficiencies that were identified in the letter, and they agreed with that. And the division recommended construction of 2 tanks. We had originally proposed 1 to reduce the footprint impact, but they said it's better to have 2 because you can have more operational flexibility and always maintain 1 tank in service. And they reviewed and approved the project based on compliance with California Water Works standards. Next slide, please. So the next slides kind of summarize the process of completing the design and getting construction funding from the Division of Financial Assistance. Next slide. So this slide summarizes some of the key engineering and investigation activities that have occurred as the project design is developed and as the CEQA environmental document was prepared in support of the project. So following completion of the master plan, the design of the test well, this is well number 6, was done between January and June 2020. July to September 2020, the environmental and permitting for the test well was completed. In October 2020 to January 2021, the test well bidding, construction, and pump testing and hydrogeo study was completed. And in end of January 2021, the test well report was completed, which confirmed that the test well has a capacity of 8 gallons per minute, which is very good for this area. In June 2020, we did topographic survey with some supplemental survey a couple of years later. There were multiple biological surveys completed between 2019 and 2024. Geotechnical investigation, wetland delineations, and a tree survey. Next slide, please. Between January 2020 and July 2021, the project was designed. So this is separate from the test well itself, but the actual design of the improvements. In October 2020, the CEQA initial study and mitigated neg deck for the project was adopted. And I'll just note again that the original project only included replacement of storage in kind, and this is because the drinking water SRF program will only fund replacement in kind. Between July 2021 and June 2022, we worked with the Division of the State Architect to make sure all their code compliance comments and concerns were addressed and that the plans were acceptable for construction. In November 2021, once we had a completed design, we were able to apply for construction funding through the Drinking Water SRF program. And that process took about a little over a year. So let's see, we applied in November 2021. The funding agreement was executed in January 2023. and the school district was successful in obtaining the maximum funding of $4.5 million. We were anticipating going to construction between April and November 2023, but construction was delayed due to challenges with the lack of bids that we were able to receive, and only one bid that we got was about $5.4 million above the available funding. So we, and that's the funding that was combined with the Urban Multi-Benefit Drought Grant that the community services got. We worked with the one contractor who bid the project to get their pricing adjusted and made some adjustments to the design to help with their costing. And through this process, this collaborative process, we were able to bring their pricing down by $3.9 million. So after this effort, though, we were still $1.5 million short, and we could not construct the project. So we went back to the State Division of Financial Assistance to request the additional funding. And they were very receptive due to the importance of the project and the tremendous effort that all the parties involved had put forward to bring the project to this point. It took a year, but we were able to get the additional $1.5 million, and that funding agreement was executed at the end of October of this year. Next slide, please. So the next series of slides summarizes the Urban Multi-Benefit Drought Relief Grant, how that ties in. Next slide. Like Mendocino Unified, MCCSD, it doesn't have a lot of money, and they had observed some of the successes that MUSD was having with grant funds, and they were in need of engineering and environmental consultation to help them pursue funding to improve their aging wastewater plant collection system. So they put out a competitive RFQ, and GHD proposed on that, and that was in August 2021, and were selected, and we got under contract in November 2021. And we began helping them seek funding for projects and performing some small engineering tasks. California then experienced its worst drought on record, as I described before, during that period, 2020.
So Matt, can I interrupt you?
Yeah.
A lot of this, while interesting, isn't germane to the permitting process. It's more like the history of the financing and
the
all
project,
of that.
sure.
So if you could just focus on the stuff that's germane to permitting, that would be helpful for us.
Sure, sure.
Make everybody on the Zoom have time to call in as well.
Okay, will do. So we applied for and obtained this grant through the Urban Multi-Benefit Drought Program. And if you could skip ahead, Rob, to slide 33. Yep, that's it. We were able to incorporate the funding into the school district's project and redesign the project and make it bigger and make the tank, basically make the tanks larger and incorporate these additional wells that are the subject of this application. There was a memorandum of understanding executed between the two districts to cooperate and coordinate on funding for a single system that provides the benefits to both MUSD and the village. That outlines the roles and responsibilities of each of the districts in implementing the project, and that MOU was intended to be modified as time passed and the districts and the project developed. So next slide, Rob. So the project was designed. We were able to bring that before you last year or earlier this year, and it was originally envisioned that there would be a separate tank and wells that would be intertied to the school district system, but as we got into it, that became impractical, and so it was just combined together into a single project, and that's the project before you here today. I won't go into any more detail about the environmental process because I think that's pretty well understood. Next couple slides, please, Rob. So we had the appeal, one more, thank you. So we'll talk a little bit about the appeal. So that was filed and by a resident who owns property nearby, and it outlined some concerns about the construction of the additional wells and the potential that they'll impact neighboring wells. In accordance with the California Coastal Commission processes, we filed a waiver of 49 working day rule and began working with the agencies to modify the project. And they were very helpful and receptive and understood the importance, and they recommended separating the test wells and the production well permitting and adjusting the layout to avoid the ESHA, which Rob described previously. Next slide, Rob. We held the site visit with the resource agencies. We were able to address all of their concerns during the site visit and develop a revised project that at the conclusion of the meeting, everyone was in agreement that it addressed all of the agency's concerns regarding ESHA and the test wells. Next slide. And this is the revised project layout. So essentially, if you can view that in a little closer detail, there are I want to point out 3 red lines that go through the site. The first line, which is on the interior of the site, is the ESHA boundary. The next line out to the south and east is the 50-foot buffer. And the next line out to the south and east is the 100-foot buffer. Okay, so you can see that the improvements have all been pushed to the far eastern edge of the property and to the southern edge of the property in order to maintain all the improvements outside of the 50-foot ESHA buffer. I won't review all the improvements that are proposed. I think these have all been seen and discussed before, but everything that was in the original application is there, with exception of reduced number of test wells and a much significantly smaller footprint of the project site. There's also the new driveway proposed instead of improving the existing driveway that's on site. Next slide, please. This just shows a few more layouts. There's one is the site layout, which shows kind of all the site improvements. There's a grading plan, and then a site utility plan. Next slide, please. So I mentioned it already contains all the key elements. The proposed water storage volume is a total of 615,000 gallons to help MUSD meet their NFPA and fire protection requirements. And I think the other things I've already mentioned. Next slide, please, Rob. So I'll just summarize now in the following series of slides. Next slide, please, Rob. So this project will bring Mendocino Unified's public water system into compliance with state, federal Safe Drinking Water Act. It addresses the deficiencies in the Division of Drinking Water's inspection letter. It modernizes the school district system and allows them to provide safe, clean drinking water to its students, staff, and faculty, and the public who use the system. It brings all their facilities into compliance with state and national fire requirements. It provides additional fire water storage for the village that can be used through the existing hydrants by first responders. And it provides a potential source of emergency potable water in the village for those who are in need when wells go dry during periods of declared drought emergency, when water is not available from other municipal water providers. Next slide, please. So I want to just make a few clarifications on some of the comments that have been raised. The state funding agencies require that the assets constructed by this project be owned and operated by a public agency. MUSD will own, operate, and maintain the water system infrastructure constructed by the project, and this arrangement has been agreed to by both MUSD and MCCSD in their MOU. The project is not part of a water system consolidation, and it does not form a larger public water system or a community water system. An investigation of water system consolidation was performed as a part of the original planning grant effort for this project, and it's documented in the Water Master Plan report with recommendations for further study. It was a requirement of the drinking water planning grant that MUSD received to do this analysis. Any organization that receives one of these planning grants is required to investigate and document the feasibility of consolidation with nearby systems. This project is not affiliated with the ongoing Safer Technical Assistance effort that was requested by MCCSD and funded by the California Water Resources Control Board to investigate the possible formation of a community water system in the village of Mendocino. MUSD's water system is one of many in Mendocino that could be considered for consolidation through this Safer Technical Assistance effort. This project did not segment or piecemeal the CEQA process. The project was developed through a master planning process in consultation with the Division of Drinking Water and other state agencies. The process was followed, the CEQA guidelines were followed, and all the notices were properly filed. This is a standalone project, and there's no future phases proposed. Next slide, please. In a separate enforcement effort, the State Division of Drinking Water is requiring all public water systems in Mendocino to meet state and federal Safe Drinking Water Act requirements. Through this project, MUSD will ensure it complies with these requirements and the ongoing enforcement actions by the Division of Drinking Water. MUSD will operate their water system sustainably to meet the normal day-to-day water demands of their facilities and the student, faculty, and staff and public who rely on their system. MUSD has an agreement with a state-certified operator to operate the water system, including Division of Drinking Water monitoring and reporting, and MUSD does not intend to change this arrangement. The amount or intensity of MUSD's normal day-to-day water use will not change with this project. Next slide, please. MUSD will monitor its new and improved wells and the water course that exists on their property. And I mentioned previously, a staff gauge has already been installed and has been read weekly for nearly a year. MUSD has no intention of dewatering adjacent or down gradient wells. MUSD remains dedicated to protecting neighboring wells and preserving the limited available groundwater in the Mendocino area. MUSD and the state agencies funding this project support these data-driven decisions and conclusions. MUSD continues to extend its offer to monitor the water levels in other neighboring and down gradient wells to assess potential effects of well pumping on groundwater levels before, during, and after the hydrogeologic study for the proposed test wells. But they need the permission of the landowners to do that. And this data will be used to inform well development and establish sustainable aquifer yields. Next slide, please. Just a quick summary on water rights, because there was some comments about this. In most of California, this comes from the State Water Board, in most of California, including Mendocino County, to get a right to groundwater, you simply extract the water and use it for beneficial purpose. If you use the groundwater on land that is over the groundwater basin from which you took the water, you have an overlying groundwater right. If you use the water somewhere else, you have an appropriative groundwater right. Overlying groundwater rights have a higher priority than appropriative groundwater rights. And if you live in a certain area and pump groundwater, you may be subject to regulations by a local entity like the county or a groundwater management district. And in Mendocino, the groundwater management agency is the Mendocino City CSD. Next slide, please. The water that MUSD extracts, treats, stores, and distributes to its public facilities through its public water system is owned by MUSD, just as the water extracted by other property owners in Mendocino is owned by them. MUSD uses its water beneficially. MUSD has no intention of providing or selling water beyond the facilities it owns or operates, except during a drought emergency when water is not available and others are in need. MUSD must ensure that the water needs of its students, staff, faculty, and the public who use its facilities are met. The people who live and work in the village of Mendocino, as we define by the boundary of MCCSD's service area, would be given priority for additional water made available during drought emergencies when water is not available from other suppliers like Fort Bragg. And this was stated in the Urban Multi-Benefit Drought Grant Funding application, and MUSD and MCCSD will maintain this purpose. Next slide, please. As much of water as possible will be made available to those in need during a drought emergency, but the amount of water has to first be verified through this hydrogeologic study of their existing wells and the test wells. And whatever water is made available will be dependent on the outcome of that study. It's expected that significantly fewer test wells will be completed and tested through this project because the funding for the Urban Multi-Benefit Drought Grant ends at the end of 2025. We have to be completed with construction by December 31st. MUSD's begun drafting an application and user agreement that would be completed by those in the community of Mendocino whose wells go dry and are in need of water during a declared drought emergency when water is not available from other suppliers. The draft application and agreement was put on hold due to the CDP appeal and the urgent need to focus on getting the CDP approved and the project constructed by the end of next year, which is when the funding ends. MUSD intends to complete the effort once the CDP and appeal process is completed. MUSD intends to use a drought stage 3 emergency as described in MCCSD's water shortage contingency plan as one trigger for availability of emergency water. The other trigger is the lack of available water from municipal water suppliers in the coastal area like the city of Fort Bragg. Initial discussions have been to provide preference for emergency water to residents over commercial businesses. This plan is consistent with the Urban Multi-Benefit Drought Relief Grant funding intent and for excess water to be prioritized for people who live and work in the village of Mendocino. Next slide. Next slide. Thank you. Initial discussions have also been to charge a cost recovery fee for the potable water. The fee is to cover the power cost to pump the water and to treat and disinfect the water to ensure it meets state and federal Safe Drinking Water Act requirements. Cost recovery fee for residents would be less than what would be charged for commercial businesses in need of water. The residential rate would probably be similar to what Fort Bragg charges. MUSD has no intention of engaging in the business of water hauling. The cost of water hauling would be borne by a user. And this is the current arrangement for someone who purchases water from municipal suppliers. Next slide. I'm going to skip the next couple of slides and just get to the end, just in the interest of time. Sorry, previous slide, please. I think this is important to note. MCCSD is pursuing state funding for a separate recycled water project. MUSD is currently MCCSD's only recycled water customer and historically irrigated the playfields of Mendocino High School campus with recycled water. Improvements at the treatment plant are needed to comply with water quality requirements to continue supplying recycled water. The use of recycled water for irrigation of the playfields and landscaping instead of well water will reduce MUSD's water demands that are currently being met by groundwater. Next slide. The project is supported by a number of organizations and individuals, including Senator Mike McGuire, the State Water Resources Control Board, Mendocino Fire Protection District, the school district, Community Services District, and a number of residents and businesses. Next slide. This is just an image of the group meeting with Mike McGuire, Superintendent Ryan Rhodes of MCCSD, and the Supervisor Williams and the Fire District Chief to discuss the project shortly after the grant funding was received. Next slide, please. So we have a very critical path timeline. All the Urban Multi-Benefit Drought Grant funding has to be, all construction has to be completed by December 31st. The program sunsets December 31st, 2026. to allow time for completion of paperwork and reporting. So we have about 1 year to complete the project. Last slide, please. The recommended action today by the commission is for the Planning Commission to approve the modified project proposed by Mendocino Unified in UM 2024-008 as conditioned, and that the Planning Commission renders the original approval of UM 2023-004 to be null and void with no legal effect as of the issuance date of the amended CDP. That concludes my slides. I apologize for the length. Thank you for that comment, Marie. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. This has been 7 years of our lives, and we're really looking forward to. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions from commissioners for the applicant?
Yeah, I have one question for the applicant. Is there an issue with us putting a special condition on the permit that requires that water only be withdrawn during the October 15th through May 15th timeframe so as not to impact local residents' access to well water during low flow conditions?
Well, the school district needs to be able to withdraw water year-round to meet their water demands. But if you're referring to when water
So
would...
650,000 gallons of water is not sufficient to meet their demands for the summer?
No, excuse me, let me restate this. So the volume of water that would be stored in the tank would be filled during the winter so during that period, Marie, that you were describing, the wet season when water is more abundant. So that's when the tanks would be filled, and then they would just be maintained as the demand is met, which is about that 5,000 gallon per day amount that the school district.
So in other words, the state water board requires the district keep the tanks completely topped off? Is that what you're telling me?
Yeah, if the water is not in the tanks, it's not available for fire protection.
Got it. So all of that water is required for fire protection?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So would you be comfortable with us having a special condition in the permit that only allows MUSD to withdraw 5,000 gallons a day during those low flow months?
Well, so as I also stated, that's about an average. It does fluctuate up and down. The demands are, not consistent day to day. So it's between, I think the number was 4,200 and 6,700 gallons per day is what the historical...
So let me get to what I'm concerned about.
Hmm?
So my concern about is if we're in a drought condition and the water wells are withdrawing enough water from the aquifer to impact surrounding residents who will then not have water, that water would then be sold to people in Mendocino to meet their water needs. So then essentially you're not meeting water right requirements. You're allocating water to people that are far away over the people who are close by, who are the neighbors who need their own water source. So that is my, I think everybody just wants to be whole here.
Sure.
And
sure.
so I'm trying to figure out a way to put a special condition on this so that it doesn't get appealed again.
Yeah.
So you can do your project and the neighbors can go home feeling confident that when they turn on the spigot in a drought, there's going to be something that flows out of that spigot. So what would you recommend?
So a condition on the amount of water that could be extracted without impacting neighboring wells is, I think, kind of what you're saying, right?
Yeah.
So part of the hydrogeo study that we're going to be doing with the test wells is monitoring the neighboring wells. And I've had discussions with one, and we've actually monitored several others during the initial hydrogeo study to assess those impacts while we were pump testing MUSD's wells. And by doing that, we'll understand, what is, I mentioned the safe aquifer yield. We'll understand what that number is. From what we know, from the data that we have, the school district's extraction and use of its normal demand, say it's that 4,200 to 6,700 gallon per day, does not appear to be impacting the neighbor's wells. At least I haven't heard from a neighbor.
Yeah, and I understand that. So
Okay.
my concern, though, is not normal year, right? Because
Sure.
normal year it's fine.
Yep.
The problem is in a drought year when the district would be selling water to other water users,
Well,
which I understand is a laudable and good goal.
Yeah, and let me clarify that. That condition would only occur during a drought emergency and only when water is not available from Fort Bragg or another municipal supplier. So if Fort Bragg has water available and is selling it, the school
Right.
district
But that still doesn't
address.
leave the neighbors with any sense of confidence that they'll have water when they need it. So that's what I'm trying to address here.
Could there be a condition that the school district provides water to neighbors?
Well, we tried that last time, but our attorney said we couldn't
Oh,
put that
that's
in
right.
there.
I remember,
But
you're right. We
I
did
don't
have
see
that
why we
discussion.
can't, because it seems like it's a reasonable mitigation measure to require.
Deputy County Council Matthew Kudrowski, the concern was whether that is some kind of a taking. It's requiring the district to do a certain thing, or a regulatory taking. So if we were to pursue that, I'd probably want to be talking more with the district about what that phrasing would be and bring that back at a subsequent meeting.
Sure. The other challenge, Marie, is that the Division of Drinking Water, so they have that requirement for the maximum day demand, right? That the wells need to be capable of producing and meeting that maximum day demand.
So is the maximum day demand in the summer lower than in the school year? I assume it would be less.
It would be, it's in the summertime is when the maximum day demand occurs.
Because of
usually
the
in the drier
watering
season.
of the fields.
I think that, yeah, that's what the historical data shows, correct. And that's why I point out the recycled water project would really put an end to that. So
Yeah, I still feel like you're not quite getting there with me. We
Yeah.
need to have a special condition here that somehow addresses this issue. So let me try a different way of asking the question. Is it possible to put a condition in there that would require the school district to not water the fields in an extreme drought condition? One, to reduce the amount of water they're using. Two, is there a way to reduce the maximum fire flow requirement in a drought, severe drought condition, so that that water can be used and sold to people in Mendocino? Because what you're telling me is you need 650,000 gallons in case there's a fire. We're in the middle of a drought. No one has water down there. So you're going to have to suck all the water out of the ground to give all those people water, because you have to keep that tank full at 6,500 gallons. 650,000 gallons. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Right?
yeah.
So essentially the water that you have in the storage tank is really only fire flow water. It's not actually storage water for a drought condition.
Yeah, and it could be made up with whatever available capacity their wells have,
Whose wells?
the school district's wells, right? Without impacting neighboring wells.
Right, I get
So-
that, but you still, yeah, I'm just,
Yeah, and
I know we have to hear other people, but
Yeah,
this, you haven't really given me a solution
Let
that
me,
solves this
yeah,
problem.
let me think through this. No, I understand what you're saying, Marie. Yeah, putting a cap on the amount of water that they can pump out of the, during a drought, you know, let me see, a condition on not irrigating playfields during drought, I think that's totally acceptable, right? And the supervisor was here, that we could certainly confer with him, but I think that would be an acceptable condition. They don't now, right? When there's a drought, they don't irrigate. So conditioning that they don't irrigate would be fine. Putting a cap on the production of the wells to meet their average day demand, that seems acceptable. They should be able to keep up. And
Can I ask a different question?
Uh-huh.
So, in your professional opinion, if the county was in a very severe drought, would the water board or whoever the regulatory agency that requires that water storage tank keep 650,000 gallons for the possibility of a fire still maintain that requirement? It just seems very odd to me.
No, so when I say the 600, it's 630 was the number that the fire code dictates. There are ways to interpret the fire code to reduce the volume of storage, right? And the furthest down you could get it is, maybe to around 200,000 or 300,000. So maybe dropping the volume of the tank down by half, and still be considered providing acceptable
Because the
protection,
problem
right?
is the way that you've described this to me, these tanks don't really solve Mendocino's water issue in a drought. Because they
Yeah.
have to be filled for firefighting. And so really what's solving the water issue for Mendocino in a drought is the ability to withdraw water from this parcel. And you've told me that you really can only produce 12 gallons per minute right now and that you need 18 gallons per minute. That's not a lot of water
Yeah.
to solve a drought situation. So it seems to me
well-
like this project is trying to do two things that you're now telling me it really can't. It really only does one.
We're not solving the problem.
Uh.
Solving the problem is a much bigger project. We're trying to provide an emergency supply of water for the people whose wells go dry.
But you can't even
we-
provide that water if
yeah.
you have to keep the tank
So-
full of water for
yeah.
firefighting.
So I think where we're getting to here is an allowable drawdown on the tank, right, to provide that water. And just talking through this with you and my understanding of the fire code requirements there, I think that could certainly be accommodated.
Okay, so maybe
Yeah.
we can do a special condition that in a drought condition, you're allowed to draw down the tank to
Half. Yeah,
to
300.
meet the water needs of the
Of the village.
Mendocino for
Yeah.
the drought condition, but that you're not going to just continue to withdraw additional water
Right.
from the aquifer. So we'll think about how to write that.
Okay.
I'm sorry we took a little while to
Yeah.
talk this through, but I think it's an important issue to resolve.
No, it's a good point. Thank you for talking.
Yeah, because if we don't, if we were to limit the pumping to the maximum daily amount for the school district, then we're not providing any additional supply
To
for
Mendocino.
the town. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. Commissioner Wiedemann, did you have any questions for the applicant?
I do, but I just had, what's at the top of, you had a biological, surveys from 219 to 224. My question was, what happened in the earlier biological surveys that they weren't able to put up in the sense of the trees?
There-
And because I guess I'm disturbed that we passed something that we didn't have a really good botanical report. And it didn't happen until there was a site visit from interagencies. And so that brings concern to me, just an issue. So did you get a new botanist for?
Well, we've had 3 or 4 different biologists who have done surveys on the site. And there were differing opinions, I think, on the allowable use within ESHA. And through our consultations with the Coastal Commission and with CDFW, what they considered allowable was clarified, and that was incorporated into the modified project.
Right, and I imagine the record has who the list of who your biologists.
Yeah, the
Okay.
authors of the various reports that were
Yeah.
prepared are.
Okay,
yes, ma'am.
thank you. I think the one thing for me, and I just say this because other people are waiting to weigh in, is I'll wait until I'll let other people weigh in. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Wiedemann. Commissioner Babini?
So most of my questions were answered, so thank you. I think most of my questions had to do with the 50-foot versus 100-foot ESHA boundary, and it didn't appear that there was really any other location outside of that 50-foot buffer that if you move the tanks, there wouldn't be more impact to the Mendocino cypress. And so I think just reevaluating the impacts here compared to the previously approved permit is kind of what we're just going to look at today. So thank you for your presentation, and I appreciate the insight into the impacts that this project brings, but also the importance of it for the school district. So thank you.
Thank you. I had a question that I had raised earlier, and you might have the answer to this. So in some of the public comment that was received, there was, excuse me, thank you. There was an assertion made that there would be about 24.5 acre feet per year withdrawn. And I ran the numbers on mine. If it's 5,000 gallons a day on average, it's more like 5.5 acre feet. What do you really anticipate the draw from the aquifer being, and do you understand where that discrepancy comes from, and could you address that?
Sure, yeah. So I think that number was being pulled from one of the hydrogeo studies that was done, where there was an estimate made of what the water that's in the available groundwater that's down there is, right? An estimate of, so as the water comes from rainfall, it percolates through the soil and flows out through there and out to the bluff. So if you look at the amount of rainfall that falls and percolates in, and how much water is in the groundwater, if you were to extract every drop out, that's what that number is. Okay, it's not what MUSD plans or ever proposed to extract. It's just what is there, right? And most of that is probably inaccessible. You would have to install hundreds and hundreds of wells to pump constantly to pull that volume of water out. But it's looking at a water balance, really. How much water is going in, how much water is flowing through, how much water is leaving, really discharging out the face of the bluffs. So that's where I believe that 20,000 or 20 acre foot number was coming from, was an estimate of what is in the ground, okay? What MUSD extracts on a normal day-to-day basis is about 5,000 gallons.
And that's what currently is being extracted, and so there's no real proposed change to the volume of extraction after this project goes through, is there?
That's just what the school district has used, from the data that we...
Except for in drought conditions.
Yeah, which would potentially be less or more if they're supplying water to the community. They're maybe not extracting more water from the ground, but supplying it out of the tank storage.
Okay, that's my question for now. Commissioner Jones or Weidman, did you have additional questions?
No, I'm busy writing up some
Special
special conditions, which I will post to Julia.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Weidman?
I just have, in time of drought, where we had, where we know what happens, right? People are buying water, and because you're in tandem now with the Mendocino Community District, you're working together here with MCCSD. My question is, what happens when, let's just say in worst case scenario, another drought? We already discussed not drawing down beyond, well, we didn't want to draw down beyond 630,000, but now you just said we could draw down to 300,000 or 200,000. So what happens then in the town of Mendocino? I'm a resident and I need water, right? Do I have to get my water trucked in? I mean, is there provisions for who gets first option to buy? And, so that's, somehow we kind of gloss over that. We're supplying a certain amount of storage, but it's not really fleshed out, right? And then we say, well, it's only, and I heard you say, which I thought was of interest, no, we're not going to sell any water or send more water unless Fort Bragg, they're the go-to person. Well, you know Fort Bragg, and will Fort Bragg have water forever for drought issues?
Well, actually, Fort Bragg is in the process right now of developing 3 additional wells on the golf course property. Each well, or not well, reservoirs.
Right.
Each well will be 45 acre feet. Is that right? Yeah. So it's quite a lot of water. Obviously, the city is also looking at developing the mill site, so some of that will be dedicated to that. But hopefully, in the future, that will certainly serve our community better.
All right. So it's just kind of like there's a gray area of what happens when droughts, which we saw trucks going in and trucks going in, and you might have a resident who is using not so much, but you have restaurants really pulling, or inns that are pulling a ton of water. And I don't know if there's provisions for that, about how that works proportionately, but I haven't seen any. So that's a concern. I don't need you to answer that yet, but
Sure.
we'll get back.
Okay,
So I'll pass.
thank you. And I did try to speak to that in the discussion about the application and making water available.
Okay, thank you very much. Anything else, Commissioner Babini? Okay,
Nope, not for me.
all right. Great. Well, thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank
Much
you.
appreciated. Where the heck are we? Yeah, public, thank you. All right, we'll now take public comment on this item. The commission will start with public comments in the room and then hear from telecommenters that are connected virtually via Zoom. When called to speak, please state your name for the record. Public comment is limited to 3 minutes per person. Speakers are asked to please address their comments to the meeting chair and to refrain from using profanity or engaging in conversation with members of the audience or staff. Are there members of the audience who would like to speak? Please come up to the microphone and please state your name for the record, and then you'll have 3 minutes.
Certainly. First of all, good morning. I guess it's 10 more minutes until it's afternoon. And thank you for the opportunity to comment. My name is Christina Arengern. I'm a former member of the MCCSD Board of Directors and chair of Mendo Matters, a modest but growing group of Mendocino's Shire residents who prefer to be kept out of the newspapers. My comments today are brief. When I voted as a director to approve this project in November of 2021, it was sold by GHD to the board and our customers as providing a source of emergency water to help meet the district's needs during summer months and periods of drought. We understood the tanks would be filled during the wet season, physically maintained, and the stored water made available in emergencies to eligible customers for drought relief within our 1 square mile district. We were not informed that the tank's water supply would be maintained throughout the year regardless of drought, and that groundwater would continue to be extracted throughout the year. Since then, this has ballooned into an over $8 million project to supply a 420 square mile school district with an emergency water in addition to its own daily needs within the community. More recently, the project has been confirmed as proposed for consolidation, the backbone of a centralized regional water system. And as of just yesterday, we have additional information, another surprise, that it is no longer being described as part of a drought relief plan, but as part of a larger plan dictated by fire flow requirements needing the 630,000 gallons of water storage. These last several pieces of information are new. Their cumulative environmental impacts have not been analyzed or considered pursuant to CEQA guidelines. In short, this is a project that has been disguising itself as something it is not. By the looks of the comments submitted, there are now 2 directors, one besides myself, of the original 5 who voted in favor of this project that now are citing serious concerns with it. As commissioners, you've been able, I hope you've been able to find and review the comments of Mendo Matters, which have been buried in an independent thread, and that you recognize how inadequate this subsequent mitigated neg deck is, and how critically a full EIR is needed to ensure state residents that their water resources and assets are protected for the benefit of this and future generations. My recommendation at this point, if I have just a little time left, is for the commission to be provided the MOU, which the original rendition, there's been 4 as I understand. The original one was for the benefit of the village of Mendocino. That language was taken out in the second MOU, and the community only gets it after all MUSD's needs are met. The other thing you need to read is the technical assistance work plan, which discusses this project as being part of a regional centralized water system, and also the draft source water study that just has been out a few weeks, which also discusses this project as being consolidated into a regional water system. Thank you again for the opportunity to comment.
Thank you very much. Any other members of? You coasties are so gracious.
Are. Good morning or afternoon almost. I'm Maggie O'Rourke. I'm a resident of Mendocino, a business owner of Mendocino, and I am one of the other board members of the MCCSD who voted in favor of this project originally. And one of the reasons I've changed my mind is because I see now the impact on the neighborhood is more profound than I originally thought. My understanding was originally that the wells were going to be deep wells. And there's a completely different groundwater availability between deep wells and shallow wells. And most of our wells are shallow wells. They're 20, 25, 30 feet deep, which we get our water from the alluvium. And after we have 9 inches of rain, it's usually no problem for us to get enough water. But during a drought year, we literally measure our water by the cup and are really careful about making sure that we reduce our extraction from the alluvium layer, because we know that we have very limited supply. And now that I see that these wells are proposed to be all in the alluvium, they're going to be shallow wells, I'm concerned that it's going to affect not a very big area, larger than we originally thought that it might be. And I'm actually the author of the original groundwater ordinance in Mendocino. And so I wrote the language of how we were going to do our groundwater testing there, which was a 72-hour drawdown test to make sure that the new development that was proposed wouldn't affect your neighbors. And part of that is integrated into this plan, but it doesn't work for this project because we envisioned that to be just one development and one well, not to be a series of 6, 7, 8, 9 wells in a large development. And the only way you can make that work is that you have this cumulative impact with all the wells, where you see what the wells are going to draw when they're all being used. In terms of the demand, and I can see the persuasion of the fire department. I agree with that. We need fire suppression water, there's no question. But this grant and this application is not from the fire department. The fire department has not participated, and from the beginning the language was not for fire suppression. It grew into that. But fire suppression can be tertiary water, it can be runoff water, it doesn't need to be potable water. And there's no reason that this should not have been done a long time ago, to take runoff water or tertiary treated water and put a big reservoir someplace closer to the fire station so that we have fire protection, and not use the potable water, particularly if the potable water is going to be extracted from neighbors' wells. So we take water from a neighboring well and get to a situation where we literally have no water for that residence in order to supply the fire department. The fire department should have their water available to them through non-potable resources.
Mr. O'Rourke, your time is up.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
So could you listen to my recommendation?
Sure.
So my recommendation would be that, one, there's a hydrological study done to recognize the impact that all of these wells would have, not just one well. And that there's some type of modeling done in order to show the impact, the substantial impact that it would have on neighboring wells. And if anybody does run out of water, there's a promise that they're going to get water. And during the test, if the tests show that we run out of water, it has to stop. You can't keep pumping water then. If the tests show that you ran out, then just to stop. And that's the way I originally wrote the groundwater ordinance for our drawdown test for the town of Mendocino, is that when you did the test well, if you impacted any neighbor and a neighbor reported they were impacted, boom, the extraction stops.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. My name is Denick Murphy. I'm a resident of the town of Mendocino. I am also, for one more day, member and chair of the Mendocino Community Services District. I want to say a couple of things here. There is no conspiracy. Different elements of this project have evolved over time as more information became available, as 2 grants and 2 separate projects became one. MCCSD wholly supports this project, and there is no intent for anyone, by anyone, to take someone else's water or deprive them of water. And I think the suggestion, Marie, that you had may be a really important one to make sure. So I appreciate that very much. This is all about building water resiliency along the coast in the face of growing climate change. There are 3 primary benefits in my mind. Obviously, the school needs its water. It's got requirements, legal requirements it needs to make. Their system needs to be updated, and this will do that. There is no significant change in the amount of water that the schools are going to be withdrawing. The only 2 additional withdrawals would would occur during a drought when Fort Bragg stops selling water, and I'll talk about that in just a moment. The fire. Well, let me just say about the drought benefit. As Marie stated, is now much more unlikely given the infrastructure improvements that the city of Fort Bragg is making. As you all may remember, the county of Mendocino stepped up with $2 million to truck water to the town of Mendocino, or to Fort Bragg, to make available to residents and businesses along the coast during our recent drought. The likelihood that a drought will be declared and the Fort Bragg will refuse to sell water along the coast is very unlikely at this point. Maybe in 15, 20 years, things will change and that may happen. But Fort Bragg has taken important steps to improve their water resiliency and, in effect, improve the water resiliency along the whole coast. Lastly, fire. And fire wasn't a major part of this discussion early on, but it is now. This is going to represent a 6-fold interest, meaning 100,000 gallons to 600,000 gallons available for fire suppression in the town of Mendocino and surrounding areas. This is huge, and as you all know, the town of Mendocino it's all wooden structures. Many of them are attached. If there were a serious fire in town, you could have another paradise of a historic village. Again, the 2 issues, I think, are Fort Bragg has built water resiliency that's important. And the other thing I'll say is that MCCSD has submitted grants, significant grants, and are hopeful that we'll receive those grants to build a recycled water program that would significantly reduce. This is an important priority for the district and for the town, and certainly should be for the county.
Could you please conclude your remarks?
Sure.
Yeah, thank you.
That we believe that the recycled water project will double the amount of water for fire and significantly reduce the demand for potable water in the village and in the school district. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for hearing our objection.
I'm sorry, it might be difficult for you, but we can hear you, but people that are at home can't unless you speak into the microphone.
Is that better?
Yes, and please state your name for the record.
My name is Claudia Boudreau, and I live on Cummings Lane, which is slightly above where the current tanks are. I have a very shallow well. I think it was hand dug. And in my experience, I've lived in that location since 1979 and have been affected in the past with water, lack of water. As we all know, water flows down, and I'm slightly above that, where they're going to build their huge tanks. In fact, my kids used to walk through there because the curve that separates the grammar school and my house is unsafe to walk on. I don't object to the rebuilding of those tanks. I know they're quite old and, lacking in capabilities. I don't object to the school district that originally proposed drilling one well very deep that I was assuming would take care of my particular instance. I don't know if you're aware that the population of Mendocino proper is slightly less than people who live on Little Lake Road or off Little Lake Road. And, therefore, we're kind of ignored when it comes to these things. And, I think that consideration for sure should happen of the people who live there. In fact, the school district has less kids in the town of Mendocino than any other area. In fact, they stress that in their, presentations. And, so far it's been adequate. But, increasing one well to 6 wells really seems unnecessary and contrary to the best interests of the neighbors. I'm not going to take any more of your time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there other members of the audience who wish to speak on this item? Come on down.
Afternoon. My name is Richard Young. I live one property above the school district's water system on Little Lake Road. I also have a shallow dug well that has gone dry twice, and I've had to buy water coming from the Fort Bragg area, trucked in water for months. I've been a volunteer fireman for the city of Mendocino for the last 35 years. We have all kinds of water resources. One of them is 100,000 gallons of guaranteed water at a hydrant at our station right there on Little Lake Road. The other thing is we have a pond actually at the Community Services District property that we can draft out of for anything going on along Main Street in Mendocino. There are no hydrants along Main Street, and that was the big concern as listed by the fire chief and the board president. There's no infrastructure that's been put in as far as hydrant distribution towards that whole side of Mendocino. So yes, there is potential for that whole strip to burn to the ground again. We have limited resources. When we do get a big fire going, it's Fort Bragg and CAL FIRE that comes in, and typically that's a limited resource coming at us too. Volunteer fire agencies are failing at an alarming rate in California, and Mendocino is approaching. So I think that the tertiary treated water coming out of the sewer district's area would be a great compromise for the excessive need for water pumped from the ground as far as fire protection of the town. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Mary Falkenrath. I am a resident of Mendocino. I live on Little Lake Road. And I had a few concerns within the report that was given. One, he keeps saying village. I'm not sure what is considered the village. Is that just the west of Highway 1 in the town of Mendocino? Are they the ones that are going to be getting that water? Is it the MCCSD? Or is it people that live above those wells that are being drilled? And when he stated that they're testing neighboring wells, I'm curious to what is considered neighboring wells as well. So my concern on this whole thing is giving water to the residents, well, the town of Mendocino, mainly the businesses, because those businesses rely on the tourists. They're not actual residents that will be benefiting from the water. And it's the residents that will be losing the water up on Little Lake Road. I'd also like to see if it can be explored that the tanks could be smaller. As mentioned, they could be 200 to 300 gallons rather than the 630,000 gallons. And I would also like to see if it can be explored that there could be other tanks, such as down by the MCCSD with the reused water, or other tanks maybe over by the Slafer's gas station has a lot of water. There's that field next to it. So I'd like other things to be explored as well if that was a possibility. And then, yeah, my other main concern was just to make sure it gets pulled if we are filling those tanks during rainy season and stops hopefully by May 1st as stated. But that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. It seems like that's everyone in the audience. No, I'm sorry.
Consensus?
No, but
Okay.
if you want to whisper to, we'll hear from the applicant again if you want.
Time is.
It is important. We do have a limited amount of time today, so. All right, I'm not seeing anyone else in the audience, so do we have anyone on Zoom?
We have 2 hands raised on Zoom.
Would you like to, I can't see their names from here. Do you want to call out? One of them?
I've been asked to unmute. Is it me?
Sure.
Okay. My name is Jerry Stavely, and I'm a property owner in the area outside the Mendocino Community Services District boundaries. And as Marie very aptly phrased the problem to me is what's going to happen to our properties in the case of a drought. And I wonder if you couldn't phrase a condition that would define what it means by having water available to the community of Mendocino. If that's a little bit vague, if that could be specified, the community of Mendocino could be specified as including the people in the aquifer that would be affected by the new wells, as well as the people in the community of Mendocino, or that the community includes the local property owners. My concerns would be greatly met. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Who else do we have on there, Jocelyn?
Next is Max Ye.
Mr. Ye, go ahead.
Yes, my name is Max Ye, and I'm not quite sure how to weigh in on this. There are so many points, but I do want to say that it seems to me that the commission is faced with a very simple problem, which is that the applicant is supposed to demonstrate clearly and convincingly to you that the extraction of groundwater that they propose is not going to harm people and the environment. I mean, that it seems to me is a fairly simple thing, and that the commission has to simply say, is there convincing proof? That is, conditions placed upon future use is not the same thing as having, having proof or at least some kind of confidence that that this project is not going to damage anybody. The people who are balking at this thing are not people who object to the project. I think everybody can sign Mr. Kennedy's list of supporters. We all support the idea of having a drought relief system or the school system updating its present system. That's not a problem. The problem is whether this can be done environmentally and reasonably. And I don't see that the application in all of its documentation has shown this. But this is, of course, up to the commission to decide. But it does seem to me that there are basically, that the basic question is very simple. Will the pumping of the ground of a total of 9 wells now, okay? 6 new wells and 3 presently in the ground, a total of 9 wells using the studies that MUSD has presented, using a thumb, let's see, just an average of 5 acre-feet capacity pumping through 9 wells. The maximum capacity of these 9 wells would be 45 acre-feet. That is a huge amount of water, and no one addresses that. And unless a cap is put on the pumping, that's the number, it seems to me, that one has to use to judge whether there's going to be an impact or not, because that's the possibility. Can you pump 45 acre-feet a year out of that ground? I mean, after all, the coast is basically rock, and we can't squeeze water out of that rock. There's just this thin layer of aquifer sitting on top of that rock. At the site, it's only 15 feet deep. And that's saturated soil. If the soil were clay, that 15 feet would contain only about 3 feet of water. That's all the water there is there. And if it draws more than that, then people downstream have less water. And that's true all the way down to the village. I mean, we were shown a map of the wells that went dry. How do we know that pumping upstream of those wells will not, dry up more wells down in the village?
Mr. Ye, your time is
Yes.
up.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
That is it for the hands raised on Zoom.
Okay, thank you.
And if I may just chime
You
in
may.
here for a moment. We do have, there's a conflict for our project coordinator, Rob Fitzsimmons, so he's going to have to be jumping off the line here in just the next couple minutes here. So I think we can continue to have discussion. We'll do our best to try to field questions, but there may be items that neither Senior Planner Russ Ford nor myself or council is able to assist with. So.
Okay, thank you. All right, well then I'm going to close the public comment period, and I'm going to ask staff if they have any final remarks while we have him still on the line.
I don't have any. I know that Commissioner Jones forwarded some draft potential additional special conditions, and I think we're still reviewing those.
Okay, thank you. Are there any final remarks from the applicant?
I don't have anything specific, except I think we're flexible in some of the ideas that were presented in terms of using the tank volume to meet any water needs with the community. I think that's totally acceptable and very viable condition. And that this project only includes 3 wells. At present, there are 6 test wells, so we're really just exploring. We're not proposing with this application to pump 6 wells in addition to 3. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, any questions from the commissioners for staff or the applicant?
I have one. I sent a modification of the email of special conditions. Did you get it? Sorry, based on one of the comments to include the areas directly around MC.
I only have one email from you.
Yeah, my email's not happy here, sending and receiving. I can try and make the change on the fly when we get there.
For the sake of discussion, I've added those tentative conditions to the resolution and brought those on screen so we can discuss.
Thank you. Just before we get to that, any, Commissioner Wiedemann, did you have any additional questions for staff or applicant?
No, I didn't have questions. I had comments.
I think we're at the comment stage.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So, I just, it's clear that I do feel that what happened for me was this 630,000 gallon storage area that to keep it topped off was first by the presentation of the applicant. That was the target. Then when discussion came back, well, maybe that's just too much water from listening to reading reports and listening to neighbors and other professionals. So then we said, maybe you could have 300,000. So I understand the 630,000 came out of, I understand how that makes sense. And when you're looking at, if you're developing a project, having more storage is a good thing. I get that. But it's about topping it off all the time. And I think it gets down to if neighboring wells are being threatened, then we really need to address that going forward. Or they feel like they're being threatened. And I understand Commissioner Jones has tried to attempt to write up something addressing that, and I'll pass until I read what she has to say.
Commissioner Babini, do you have any additional questions for applicant or staff or comments you'd like to make now?
I know that there was some discussion about non-potable water, and I guess I just wanted clarification that you can't mix in the tanks, correct? So if there was going to be the inclusion of reclaimed water, say for watering the fields in the summer, that would need additional storage, correct? Or would that be on a time-by-time basis bringing it in?
Different location.
Okay.
Different location.
Okay.
Go ahead.
If I could really quickly, the site plan that was shown on the screen does show where the location of that future tank is. It's on the same site, being adjacent to the two potable water tanks.
And I see that on page 39 of the slideshow that you presented, and so I wasn't quite clear if that is included in this application to put that third tank there right now.
No, that's actually part of a previous application that was approved by the commission. And we're just hoping to get the funding to build it now.
Got it. Okay. Thank you for the clarification. I just wanted to make sure that I was understanding that properly.
Anything else, Commissioner Babini?
Not for me.
Okay. Commissioner Wiedemann?
And I just want to say about the wastewater. Right now, the waste plant at the town of Mendocino is at capacity, might even be over capacity. And so they really, that's a whole nother issue when we're looking at adding more water that has to go to that waste plant. It just doesn't flush into the ocean. So certain things aren't being addressed and tied together, and those are my concerns.
Mr. Kennedy?
If I may briefly state, the wastewater treatment plant capacity is not over its design. It functions well within its treatment capacity, and it's capable of handling all the wastewater flows that it receives with quite a significant amount of additional capacity. The project would not add more flow to the wastewater treatment plant.
I guess in my mind, in terms of the size of in terms of the size of the tanks that are going to be there, I mean, if anything, if the money was there, it'd be great to have even more storage capacity there so that it could actually serve as a storage buffer in a drought situation. So if anything, larger tanks would be great. I do think if there is the ability for operational flexibility to use some of that stored water that is put in there in the wintertime when the water is abundant, that would be really helpful. And I think maybe we'll get to that as well. Yeah, so I think if there's nothing else, I think then we'll bring this to the commission for discussion. We'll look at the proposed modifications that have been made, and we'll see if we get to a vote.
Okay, so let me describe what I did initially. So the first two conditions, I literally took verbatim just about from the staff report. There were statements that were made that this is part of the project, and to me, they just needed to be put in as conditions. I think everybody agrees to them. They're not big deals.
Can you just make sure you're in your microphone so people at home can hear you?
Sorry, my mic's so short.
I know.
I have too many things on my table here. So just the first one is just you're not using the water unless it's in an emergency for Mendocino Coast Community. I don't know what MCCSD spells out for, but you get the point. And then hydrologic testing have to not impact neighboring wells, so they can only produce new wells if it's shown that they don't impact existing wells. Number 16 is new, so the applicant shall only withdraw groundwater to fill the storage tanks from the aquifer during the rainy season. So to fill means to fill, not replacement water. The next one is replacement water shall be withdrawn during the dry season, May 15th through October 15th, only to meet MUSD's direct daily water needs. So that's getting to the just meeting MUSD's water needs during the drought. And the next one is setting aside 50% of that water storage for use by people in an extreme drought. And then I put in parentheses, unless more is allowed by a state regulatory agency. And then including the property owners in the area around MUSD who are affected by the groundwater drawdown from the aquifer. So I think that kind of helps everybody address that issue. Just want to see this come back to the commission for actual well permitting, just because of how this has gone on and giving the neighbors a chance to learn about all of that. And then MUSD water may not be used to provide water source for existing or new development during non-drought conditions. So that just further emphasized that this is not a growth-inducing project. And then I also wanted to add a finding, but I guess did you put the finding in too? So the finding is that it's really only intended to address existing identified deficiencies and that will not increase potential demand for the area or be growth inducing. And I think you really need that just from a CEQA perspective. So those are my suggestions.
Great. I wonder if we could go back to the special conditions, how the maker of the motion would feel about a modification to, you could go down condition 18, rather than stating a percentage of the water stored. I wonder if we want to say that during drought conditions, as much of the stored water as is permissible by state regulatory agencies could be utilized, because I don't think we have.
I'm fine with that.
Yeah, we don't have that number in front of us right now.
That's a good clarification. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I like when council nods. Commissioner Babini, did you have any questions or comments about those new proposed modifications?
No, I agree with the removal of the set percentage just because it gave me pause, also without knowing if there was any regulatory percentage necessary.
Can I get a restatement of the language?
Sure. Let's see.
I would just say stored water that is as allowed by state regulatory. So just, in parentheses. So unless more is allowed, just say as allowed. Yep, perfect. Stored water can be used.
So here's a question. So it says can be used for MCCSD customers whose wells have run dry. Does that address the concerns of people on Little Lake Road? Are they?
That's why I have the parenthetical. So you
Okay.
could use a comma after dry, including the property owners in the area
yeah,
around
okay.
who are affected by groundwater drawdown from the aquifer.
Or maybe instead of including as well as, because.
Oh, maybe, yeah, as well
Because
as.
I don't think those people are MCCSD customers, right?
Right. Hard to listen and write.
Mr. Kennedy, please.
Thank you. I just wanted to acknowledge there was a comment made about the folks that are drawing from the aquifer, the same aquifer, and I thought that that was a great.
Good language.
Yeah, I thought that was great language. Yeah, because that's really what we're. I understand there's some. It's
I
a
think
little.
that's in there.
Well,
It says from the aquifer.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I couldn't read it very well. But I just thought that that was a great way
So
of
during
wording
drought
it.
conditions, stored water as allowed by state regulatory agencies in the water tanks can be used for MCCSD customers whose wells have run dry, as well as property owners in the area around MUSD who are affected by MUSD groundwater drawdown from the aquifer. I think we got it.
Does that encompass?
No, I don't know if it's the whole town. I don't know where the aquifer ends. Right, and everybody who's in that same.
Director Krog.
I think staff would need some time to go over these conditions. I think this number 18 has some concerns for me about how what this area actually covers, because it's not. It could be interpreted in multiple different ways.
I actually started out with half a mile, and then I was like, "Oh, people aren't going to like that."
So, I mean, I think at least from staff perspective, we would request some time to be able to review these.
Like a recess time, or like bring it back another day?
Like maybe we could take about 20 minutes.
Well, I know that Commissioner Babini has a child care obligation and Commissioner Wiedemann has a airplane obligation.
So then, my recommendation would be perhaps we continue this to the next agenda, which would then be the December 19th, I believe it is. There's only one item currently on that agenda, so that could be opportunity to discuss this further.
Why don't we just do a number of feet? Like, what's a reasonable distance? I think we have an expert in the room that can help us with that. Is it 5,000 feet from the property line?
Okay, admittedly, I'm not a hydrogeologist. I'm a civil engineer. But what I was thinking, we were talking about the aquifer, right, and the boundaries of that. The aquifer is generally defined by the watershed of Slaughterhouse Creek, and that may be an appropriate way of defining it. So we've talked about the MCCSD service area boundary. We've talked about the aquifer, that is in that area. Slaughterhouse Creek is a big part of that aquifer and is a large contributory area. Admittedly, it's not the entire aquifer. There is kind of a divide on Little Lake Road. So Little Lake Road, water on the north side is really part of that Slaughterhouse Creek Gulch shed and aquifer. And then on the south side of Little Lake Road, the aquifer, there isn't a defined drainage. It just sort of flows out towards the big river and towards the bluff in the village. So that's kind of the area that defines the village and defines the aquifer.
As the agent for MUSD, do you think they would object to using the definition of the Slaughterhouse Creek aquifer?
The Slaughterhouse Gulch aquifer? I don't think so. I mean, that's where the water is being drawn from, is the aquifer that is within the Slaughterhouse Gulch watershed. And that's why we believe there's, water there, is because, that stream flows year round.
Does that help you, Julia?
And it's definable.
It's definable.
Yes.
The Slaughterhouse Creek aquifer is defined.
And it is defined. We have delineated that.
I just think that we would want to have that very clearly spelled out in a condition, which I'm just not sure is going to happen on the fly.
We can't just change the wording, draw down from the Slaughterhouse Creek Aquifer?
Gulch.
Slaughterhouse. I'm just trying to save us having a whole nother meeting on
Well, we
this.
already
I mean,
have
it's
another
worth
meeting, but,
taking
yeah.
5 minutes if we can not have to have another meeting.
Well, and I guess this is a question for the commission too. I don't know the extent of what that aquifer actually covers, so I don't know if the commission would be confident.
I have a little
in-
history on that aquifer and others right across the street. They did dye test, putting dye in people's wells, and they ended up like in the town of Mendocino, all over the place. So it's more complicated than just a study. And those dye tests were done several years in a row. And way back when, during Eleanor Severco was around for this. So I don't want to rush this little last bit. I think we've done good. I think Commissioner Jones, with the rest of the commission, has trying to, thread the needle. But I do think it's such an important project. We need to do it right, and it's okay to come back to another meeting.
I feel similarly that I feel inclined to have staff review this and provide it since
I don't think it's necessary. Slaughterhouse Aquifer is a defined entity. That's what would be impacted by a water drawdown, so I'm comfortable just going forward with that language if the applicant is. It's something you can map. We may not have the map in front of us, but I'm sure that a map could be provided.
I do have a map of it, yes.
You have a map of it.
Yes,
a
ma'am.
map exists.
Yes.
But how are you going to get better than that by the 19th of December?
It sounded like potentially council and staff wanted time to review all of the conditions, not just the one that we're discussing now.
Deputy County Counsel, do you have a? Okay.
Deputy County Council Matthew Kudrowski. I think 7 to 8 additional conditions, there's a lot to unpack in some of those, even just down to some grammatical issues. And so I'd prefer to have time to review those, put a packet in front of the commission and in front of the public to review. And at that point, we'll hear anyone's comments on what these conditions do, if they meet any concerns or not.
Right. I'm seeing some stirring in the audience that perhaps the proposal as we've drafted it wouldn't be good. So it would be nice for the public to be able to see these new conditions and be able to weigh in. So,
And I think as part of coming back for a continued item, we can certainly work with the applicant as well to get a copy of the map that they have of this aquifer area, include that as part of the packet too. So for the public and for the commissioners, you're able to review what that area is actually including.
That would be great. All right. Well, do we need to?
Need to extend the hearing.
Yeah. Do we need to make a motion to continue this to a date certain?
Yes, please.
If I may, through the chair, does the commission want to offer any comments on the other proposals right now, and we can take those back and do them all together?
I'm pretty comfortable with the rest of the proposed amendments myself. Commissioner Bavini?
Agreed.
Commissioner Wiedemann?
It's pretty close.
Great. Okay, thank you. All right, then I'd invite a motion to continue this item to the December 19th, 2024 meeting.
I'll make a motion to continue this item to the December 19th.
I'll
Planning
second it.
Commission meeting.
Okay. All right. All in favor, roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Jones?
Yes.
Commissioner Bavini?
Yes.
Commissioner Wiedemann?
Yes.
Chair Poland?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
You're going.
Okay, thanks. All right, I know that time is of the essence. I'm sure people's bellies are grumbling, but I think we only have one more item.
So we have an issue, and I just want to get county council's opinion on this. Diana has to leave because she has to go catch a plane. And unfortunately, City of Fort Bragg is a major client of mine, although I have not worked on this project directly and have no relationship to this project, so I'm not sure if I need to recuse myself or not. And if both of us leave, then you don't have a quorum.
Let me look.
The next one is
water
the
line.
water line in Fort Bragg.
Fort Bragg.
And so my, due to the school shooting in Orville, all of our aftercare has been canceled for today. And so I have to leave here by 1:15.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Commissioner Wiedemann, are you able to remain, or do you need to leave right now?
If we can do this quickly, I'll try to stay.
Kind of a big project.
Oh, we got Russ.
Is
He's ready to go.
big?
Okay, let's try and take
Should I
it.
leave? No legal advice.
Commissioner
Well,
Jones?
I mean, like my major clients.
No, you have to go.
All right.
Get out of
So,
here.
do we
You
need to make a
lucky
finding
devil.
of Commissioner recusing themselves, or?
No, you don't.
The commissioner does have to state she's recusing herself from the item.
I'm recusing myself because the city of Fort Bragg is a major client.
Thank you very much. All right. Then moving on, item 6C. This is case number U_2024-001, aka CDP _2023-0003. Charles A. Peavy and Anna R. Munoz, trustees of the Peavy Munoz Family Revocable Trust, dated July 19th, 1988. This is a coastal development use permit for the replacement of approximately 1 mile of the city of Fort Bragg's main raw water supply line. I'll open the public hearing now. Have there been any correspondence or telephone calls received?
All correspondence have been posted to the website.
Do we have to wait for her to leave the room? All right, I'll hold off a second.
Get out of here, quick.
She's going to be influencing us with her steely gaze. Thank you, Commissioner Jones. And she's gone. All right. I'll open the public hearing now. Has there been any correspondence and/or telephone calls received?
I have posted everything to the website.
Great, thank you. May we have a presentation from staff, please?
Good afternoon, Russ Ford, Senior Planner, filling in for Project Planner Rob Fitzsimmons, who had to step away, so bear with me a little bit this afternoon. So this project was originally taken in and referred out with the permit number CDP 2023-03 before being reclassified as a use permit. The proposal before the Planning Commission is for a portion of a larger project spanning multiple jurisdictional boundaries. This presentation will provide information on the broader project to give context to the request, and because that's what the environmental document speaks to, but it is important to start by making clear what the Planning Commission actually has approval authority over today. For the purposes of this project, the site is located in the coastal zone, spanning approximately 1 mile across 4 parcels and the Noyo River, starting 1.6 miles southeast of the city of Fort Bragg. This is a portion of the yellow and black stripe line on the inside of the curve created by the red line. The red line represents the coastal zone boundary, which, as you can see, swings up and in around the city of Fort Bragg, visible in the upper left. The pipeline extends beyond the coastal zone boundary, but only the identified portion is both within the coastal zone and the unincorporated area of the county, and so subject to the Planning Commission's discretionary review. Segments of the pipeline located within Fort Bragg city limits are subject to the city's planning jurisdiction. There are portions of the pipeline located on inland unincorporated county parcels which do fall under the county's permitting jurisdiction, but these all allow minor impact utilities by right, and they are not subject to the Planning Commission's case-by-case discretion. So again, this coastal development use permit only covers the work on the inside of the red line curve on the image on screen. The project is situated in the Noyo River Redwood Forest watershed. The area is heavily wooded with areas of steep and unstable slopes. The existing raw water pipeline currently runs through or near the project site, with sections reaching the end of their service life and pipe failures becoming more regular and widespread. Portions of the existing pipeline are partially buried with the pipe crown exposed, while one section is above ground and supported on an aging and deteriorating wooden trestle. The proposed work to be covered by this permit comprises the replacement or realignment of the existing water line, including about 7,400 feet of new pipe. The proposal also includes the installation of lining along the portion of the pipeline crossing the Noyo River. The city now expects to perform the river lining component at a later time, which may be after this permit expires, but as the environmental impacts of the component have already been evaluated, there seems little reason to exclude the component from consideration at this time. If the work is not performed within the time frame allotted by this permit, the city will need to apply for a new modification or permit, which is the same process that would apply if it were dropped from the permit today. The City of Fort Bragg, as the lead agency, has adopted an initial study and mitigated negative declaration pursuant to CEQA covering the broader project, inclusive both of the segments subject to this permit and those not subject to it. The city found that all potential environmental impacts could be mitigated down to a less than significant level. Staff recommends the Planning Commission adopt the city's M&D as a responsible agency, incorporating the mitigations included therein into the conditions of approval for this permit. The Coastal Zoning Code establishes findings which must be made in order to approve the project. These findings are included in the draft resolution before you. Staff feel with the information presented in the staff report and this presentation, and with the recommended conditions, all applicable findings can be made. Staff recommends the action on screen, conditionally approving this project. That concludes staff's presentation, and we're available for questions. Here's an additional slide of the findings. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions from the commissioners for staff?
No, none for me.
So easy, okay. Do we have the applicant present? Maurice, the applicant? No.
Looks like on Zoom we have a Diane.
All right.
Can you hear me?
We got you.
All right, thank you. I'm Diane O'Connor. I'm Assistant City Engineer for the City of Fort Bragg Public Works Department, and I'm the project manager for this project. Thank you very much for taking it under consideration.
Did you have anything you wanted to add to the staff report?
I think it was pretty thorough. Like I said, we've been planning on doing this project for some time, and we're really excited about finally moving forward with our permit. We've started constructions of some portions of it that are outside of the coastal zone, and really hope that we can carry this project through and finish it up next summer so that we can have a more reliable water supply to our residents.
Great. Thank you very much. Any questions from the commission for the applicant? All right.
None from me.
Okay. Public comment. Is there anyone in the room who wishes to speak on this? Seeing none. Anyone on Zoom with their hand raised?
There are no hands raised in Zoom.
Okay. I will close the public comment then. Staff, do you have any final remarks?
Nothing further, thank you.
All right. Any final remarks from the applicant?
No?
Great. All right. Do we have any additional questions for staff or the applicant? I'm guessing not. All right, I will close the public hearing then. The matter is now before the commission. Any discussion? If not, I'll invite a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve U 2024-0010, aka CDP 2023-0003. I think I only said 3 zeros. City of Fort Bragg Public Works Department. Resolution of the Planning Commission, County of Mendocino, State of California, granting a coastal development use permit for the replacement of approximately 1 mile of the city's of Fort Bragg's main raw water supply pipeline as described in this application.
All right, do we have a second?
I'll second.
All right, roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Babini,
Yes.
Commissioner Wiedemann,
Yes.
Chair Pollan.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
All right, thank you. Agenda item number 7, matters from staff. Do we have any additional items from staff today?
None, thank you.
All right. Matters from the commission.
None.
I'm just going to read some James Joyce for about 40 or 50 minutes, if that works. Okay. Well, then none there. Then I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion to adjourn the meeting today.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. Thank you all very much. See you in a couple weeks.